For 50 years, he was the all-American icon of masculinity. A man whose chiseled jaw, athletic grace, and raw power defined a generation of Hollywood heroes. He was the soldier kissing on the beach in From Here to Eternity, the swashbuckling pirate, the tough-as-nails inmate. But what if the image was just that, an image? What if the man who embodied American strength was hiding a secret so profound it would have shattered his career and the fantasy of Hollywood itself? There's a story, a legend that's been whispered in books and echoed across the internet for years. It's a story of a final deathbed confession. A story that claims that just before he died, the ultimate man's man, Burt Lancaster, finally broke his silence and named the secret gay lovers he had during the height of his fame. We're talking about superstars like Cary Grant, Marlon Brando, the titans of the silver screen. But is this explosive confession real? Or is it just one of old Hollywood's most elaborate myths? Today, we're digging into the story of the confession that has rocked Hollywood retrospectives. We'll separate the whispers from the facts, examining the life of Burt Lancaster and the men he supposedly loved, to figure out what's real and what's pure Hollywood fiction. This is the story of the rumor that won't die and the oppressive, secret-filled world that made it so believable. The story, as it's usually told, sounds like it was ripped straight from a movie script. It goes like this. In the final years of his life, after a massive stroke in 1990 stole his powerful voice, Burt Lancaster was trapped in silence. It was in this state, supposedly communicating with trusted friends, that he unburdened himself of a lifetime of secrets. He confessed, so the legend goes, to a series of passionate hidden affairs with some of the most famous men in the world. The online accounts and viral videos are incredibly specific. They paint a picture of secret meetings and passionate encounters, all hidden from the watchful eyes of the studios and the press. They claim Lancaster revealed the details of a fiery, chaotic relationship with Marlon Brando, a man who matched his own passion and volatility. They speak of a heartbreakingly brief affair with the impossibly suave Cary Grant, a romance that ended because Grant was terrified of being exposed. Some versions of the story even throw in the shocking name of J. Edgar Hoover, the feared and all-powerful director of the FBI. It's a bombshell of a story, a tale of forbidden love among Hollywood gods. It reframes our entire understanding of these hyper-masculine icons, showing them not as the heroes they played on screen, but as complex men navigating a secret world of desire and fear. The story is powerful, intoxicating, and it's been repeated, so often that it started to feel like a fact, and its power comes from its plausibility. We know that old Hollywood was a place of stunning hypocrisy, an industry that sold a fantasy of wholesome American life while running on secrets and lies. The story of Lancaster's confession taps right into that. It feeds our suspicion that, behind the perfect smiles and studio-approved dates, there was always a darker, more interesting reality. But did it actually happen? Did Burt Lancaster really make this confession? To find the answer, we have to look past the legend and into the life of the man himself. And what we find is a story far more complicated and in some ways far more tragic than any internet rumor. To understand the rumor, you have to understand the man. Burton Stephen Lancaster was born in East Harlem, New York, in 1913, the son of a postal worker. He wasn't from a theatrical family. He was a product of the city streets. He was an incredible athlete, a gifted gymnast who joined the circus with his friend Nick Cravat when he was young. That was the foundation of his entire persona: raw physicality, real toughness, and a grace that came from a life of actual, physical risk. When he got to Hollywood, he was an instant sensation. He wasn't polished, he was electric. In movies like The Killers and Brute Force, he had this intimidating presence that was nothing like the refined leading men of the time. He was tough, he was brooding, but he had a sensitivity that was always flickering just under the surface. This made him one of the biggest stars in the world. Publicly, His life was a testament to traditional masculinity. He was married 3 times and was a legendary womanizer. Biographies are filled with his passionate affairs with a long list of Hollywood's most famous actresses. He was a devoted father to his 5 kids, though by some accounts a pretty domineering one. Biographer Kate Buford, who worked with Lancaster's widow and friends for her book Burt Lancaster, An American Life, described him as startlingly handsome, witty, fanatically loyal, charming, scary, and intensely sexual. The people who knew him best painted a picture of a complex, powerful man whose romantic life was overwhelmingly focused on women. So where did the whispers of a secret gay life come from? Part of it is just the nature of that kind of extreme. Masculinity, in a world built on illusion, it almost invites suspicion. But the rumors had a little more to go on. The FBI, under the paranoid J. Edgar Hoover, did keep a file on Lancaster. But when you actually look at the file, you see the FBI was mostly interested in his politics. They tracked him for his liberal activism, his support for civil rights, and his opposition to the Red Scare, all of which they saw as potential communist sympathies. The file does mention alleged homosexual behavior. A 1963 memo notes Lancaster's name was in a guest book found during a raid on the home of a man described as a millionaire and notorious homosexual. But that's hardly a smoking gun. FBI files from that time were packed with hearsay and unverified tips, often used to discredit people the Bureau saw as political threats. His name in a book just proves he went to a party. The biggest challenge to the final confession story, though, is a sad and simple medical fact. The severe stroke Lancaster had in 1990 left him, according to every credible account, almost completely unable to speak for the last 4 years of his life. His health was shattered, and he was largely incapacitated until his death in 1994. The idea that he could have clearly communicated detailed stories of complex, decades-old affairs during this time is, medically speaking, just profoundly unlikely. A man who could barely express his basic needs was in no position to dictate a secret history of Hollywood. So if the confession itself is almost certainly a myth, where did the specific names come from? Why Cary Grant and Marlon Brando? To answer that, we have to look at the men he supposedly named, and the fertile ground of rumor that made them the perfect candidates for this modern legend. The legend of Lancaster's confession works because the alleged partners are believable. The storytellers didn't just pick random names, they picked icons whose own lives were already surrounded by mystery and speculation. First up is Cary Grant, the definition of sophisticated charm. The rumor claims Lancaster and Grant had a brief, passionate affair in the late 1940s, a secret romance that ended when a terrified Grant broke it off. Of all the names linked to Lancaster, Grant's is the one with the most well-documented history of queer speculation. And for good reason. For 12 years, off and on, Grant lived with fellow actor Randolph Scott in a home they called Bachelor Hall. Fan magazines published photos of them living a life of domestic bliss, doing dishes, lounging by the pool, and the studio sold it as 2 frugal guys saving on rent. A wholesome bromance. But even back then, it raised eyebrows. Friends and insiders have told conflicting stories for years. Hollywood fixer Scotty Bowers claimed in his tell-all book that he had relationships with both men and that their status as lovers was an open secret. Director George Cukor once joked, "Oh, Cary won't talk about it, but Randolph will admit it," to a friend. Now Grant was married 5 times, and his family has always denied the rumors. But here's the thing. The rumors about Cary Grant and Randolph Scott are a legitimate part of Hollywood's queer history. The problem is, when it comes to Burt Lancaster, there are no credible biographical sources, no letters, no diary entries, and no verified accounts that romantically link the 2 men. The story seems to be a modern invention, piggybacking on the much more substantial rumors about Grant and Scott. It takes the very real mystery of Grant's private life and just grafts a new, unsubstantiated affair onto it. The second name on the list is Marlon Brando. the rebel who changed acting forever. The legend says their affair was a clash of titans, chaotic, passionate, and fueled by rivalry. Unlike with Grant, the evidence of Marlon Brando's bisexuality comes from the man himself. Brando was incredibly open for his time. In a famous 1976 interview, he said, "Homosexuality is so much in fashion, it no longer makes news. Like a large number of men, I too have had homosexual experiences, and I am not ashamed." Brando's romantic life was a whirlwind of affairs with both men and women. His relationship with actor Wally Cox was so deep that he kept Cox's ashes for 30 years and had them scattered with his own. Music producer Quincy Jones even claimed in 2018 that Brando had relationships with Richard Pryor and James Baldwin. So, is it plausible that he had an affair with Burt Lancaster? Given Brando's history, you can't rule it out entirely. The problem, once again, is a total lack of credible evidence. Not a single respected biography of either Brando or Lancaster supports the claim. The story of their passionate secret meetings seems to be a fabrication, a compelling piece of fan fiction that pits two. For now, that's all it is. The most bizarre name on the list is J. Edgar Hoover. This part of the rumor claims their connection was less of a romance and more of a dark power play. This claim is the easiest one to take apart. The rumors about Hoover's own sexuality, especially his intense relationship with his deputy Clyde Tolson, are a well-known part of American history. And we know Hoover's FBI was obsessed with Hollywood's morals. As we mentioned, they kept a file on Lancaster for his politics, and Lancaster even tried to get a meeting with Hoover in 1957, which the director denied. There was a connection, but it was one of surveillance and suspicion, not romance. The claim of a secret relationship is completely unsupported by evidence. It feels like a sensationalist flourish added to the legend, twisting two separate strands of historical gossip into one explosive and baseless claim. So, if the confession is medically improbable and the relationships are unsubstantiated, why won't this story die? Why is it so compelling? The answer is that the legend speaks to a deeper truth. The real story isn't about one man's confession. It's about the brutal system that demanded silence from an entire generation. The myth persists because it's rooted in the very real history of old Hollywood's lavender marriages and the suppression of LGBTQ+ identities. During Hollywood's golden age, studios had absolute power. Actors were property, their images carefully built and fiercely protected by morality clauses in their contracts. These clauses let studios fire any star whose private life could bring bad press. In an era when being gay was considered both a crime and a mental illness, getting outed was a career death sentence. Studios went to extraordinary lengths to maintain a facade of heterosexuality. For gay and bisexual actors, this meant living a double life filled with secret gatherings and constant fear. For many, the only way to survive was a lavender marriage, a sham marriage of convenience, arranged by the studio to provide a public cover. The most famous and tragic example is Rock Hudson. Hudson was America's boy next door, but his public persona was a complete fabrication to hide the fact that he was a gay man. In 1955, when a tabloid threatened to expose him, his agent quickly arranged a marriage to his secretary. Hudson lived in terror of exposure his entire life, a secret he kept until he became the first major celebrity to die from AIDS in 1985, and he wasn't alone. Teen idol Tab Hunter's career almost ended when his arrest at a gay party was leaked to the press. He was forced into a series of dates with actresses like Natalie Wood to save his image, all while he was in a long-term relationship with actor Anthony Perkins. This is the world that makes the Burt Lancaster rumor so potent. We know this culture of cover-ups existed. We know the images sold to the public were often a lie. When the truth is systematically buried, rumor and speculation will always rush in to fill the void. In the end, the story of Burt Lancaster names the gay actors of old Hollywood he dated in secret seems to be just that, a story. It's a piece of modern folklore, a narrative built by connecting the dots of rumor and grafting them onto the very real history of Hollywood repression. There's no credible evidence that Burt Lancaster ever made a final confession. His biographies portray him as a man overwhelmingly interested in women, and the medical facts of his final years make a detailed confession all but impossible. But to just dismiss the legend is to miss the point. The story resonates for a reason. The real tragedy isn't this specific, likely fabricated confession. The real tragedy is the entire system that would have made such a confession necessary. A system that forced stars like Rock Hudson into sham marriages and made Cary Grant and Randolph Scott's partnership the subject of whispers for half a century. The legacy of old Hollywood is one of breathtaking art and profound hypocrisy. The story of Lancaster's rumored confession, while factually shaky, is a haunting reminder of the secret still buried beneath the veneer of Hollywood's golden age. It makes you wonder, how many other stories were never told? How many truths were taken to the grave by a world that demanded its heroes be perfect, simple, and ultimately unreal? What do you think? Is this a case of a historical rumor that got out of hand, or do you believe there's a kernel of truth buried in there somewhere? Which old Hollywood story shocks you the most? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more deep dives into the hidden histories of the silver screen, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.